Chapter 10, How to Motivate Others. Pilot number 10. It is important to know how to motivate others in an effective manner and in a desirable direction. Throughout me you play dual parts in which you motivate others and they motivate you, parent and child, teacher and pupil, salesman and buyer, master and servant. You take each part. How a child motivated his father. A boy 2½ years of age was walking with his father after a very heavy Christmas Day dinner. When they had walked about a block and a half, the youngster stopped, looked up at his father with a smile, and said, "Daddy," then hesitated. His father responded, "Yes." The boy paused for a second or two and continued, "If you say please, I'll let you carry me." Now, who could resist this type of motivation? Even a newborn baby motivates his parents to action. And, of course, a parent motivates a child. We saw this illustrated by Thomas Edison and his mother. Having confidence in a youngster gives him confidence in himself. When the child feels that he is wrapped in the warm, secure belief that he will do well, he is actually able to do better than he knows. His defenses are relaxed, his guard down. He is able to stop spending emotional energy protecting himself from the possible hurts of failure. Instead he spends his energy reaching for the probable rewards of success. He is relaxed. Confidence has had a measurable effect on his ability. It has brought out the best in him. "My mother was the making of me," said Edison. And Napoleon Hill himself had an experience in this direction. He speaks about it in this way. "When I was a youngster, I was considered to be a hellion. Whenever a cow was let loose from her pasture, or a dam broken, or a tree cut down mysteriously, it was young Napoleon Hill that everyone suspected. And, furthermore, there was some justification for all of this suspicion. My own mother was dead, and my father and brothers thought I was bad, so I really was pretty bad. If people considered me this way, I was not going to disappoint them. And then one day, my father announced that he was going to remarry. All of us were worried about what kind of a new mother * we were going to have, but I in particular was bound and determined that no new mother coming into our home would be able to find a place in my heart. The day finally came when this strange woman entered our home. My father stood back and let her handle the situation in her own way. She went around the room and greeted each of us cheerfully, that is, until she came to me. I stood straight as a ramrod, with my hands folded over my chest, and glared at her without the least suggestion of welcome in my eyes. "And this is Napoleon / my father said. "The worst boy in the hills." And with that 111 never forget what my stepmother did. She put both hands on my shoulders and looked me straight in the eye with a twinkle in her own eyes that I shall hold dear forever. "The worst boy," she said. "Not at all. He's just the brightest boy in these hills, and all we have to do is to bring that out in him." My stepmother was always the one who encouraged me to strike out on my own with such bold schemes as later proved the backbone of my career. I will never forget the great lesson she taught me in how to motivate others by giving them confidence in themselves. For my stepmother was the making of me. Her deep love and unshakable faith motivated me to try to become the kind of a boy she believed me to be. So you can motivate others by having faith in them. Faith, rightly understood, is active, not passive. Passive faith is no more a force than sight is in an eye that does not observe. Active faith steps out on its belief and risks failure because it assumes it will succeed. When you motivate others by having faith in them, then you must have an active faith. You must commit your belief. You must say, "I know that you are going to succeed in this job, so I have committed myself and others to your success. We are here, waiting for you." When you have that kind of faith in another man, he will succeed. Now faith can be expressed in a letter. In fact, a letter is an excellent tool for expressing one's thoughts and motivating another person. A letter can change a life for the better. Anyone who writes a letter affects the subconscious mind of the receiver through suggestion. And the power of this suggestion is, of course, dependent upon several factors. If you are a parent, for example, and your son or daughter is away at school, you can accomplish that which you might not otherwise achieve. You can grasp the opportunity, A. to mold the character of your child, B. to discuss matters that you might hesitate or never take the time to discuss in conversation, and C. to express your inner thoughts. Now, a boy or girl may not readily accept advice when it is given verbally. For environment and emotions involved at the time of the conversation might prevent this. And yet the same boy or girl would treasure the same advice received in a carefully written, sincere letter. To a son or daughter away from home, a letter with all of its contents, including advice, is most welcome. And if it is properly written, it may be read frequently, studied, and digested. And the sales manager who writes the right type of letter to his salesman can motivate them to break all previous records. Likewise, the salesman who writes his sales manager will benefit from this tool of motivation. Now, to write a letter, one must think. Therefore, he crystallizes his ideas on paper. And he can ask questions to direct the recipient's mind in the desired channels. In fact, he can ask a question to obtain a letter in return. Or when the person he would like to hear from does not write, he, like an advertising expert, can use a bait. That's what J. Pierpont Morgan did. One way to motivate a college student to write. J. Pierpont Morgan proved there is at least one way to get college students to answer a letter. His sister had complained that her 2 college sons just wouldn't write home. Mr. Morgan said that he could get the boys to respond immediately if he sent a letter. And then his sister challenged him to prove it. So he wrote each nephew and received an immediate reply from both. Surprised, his sister asked, "How did you do it?" Morgan handed the letters to her and she saw that both contained interesting information about college life and thoughts of home. But the postscript on each was similar. One read, "The $10 you said was enclosed in your letter wasn't received." Motivate by example. A successful sales manager knows that one of the most effective means to motivate a salesman is to set an example when working with him in the field. W. Clement Stone has inspired many people with the story he tells about how he trained a salesman who lived at Sioux City, Iowa. Here's the way he tells it: "I listened to one of our salesmen at Sioux City, Iowa gripe for over 2 hours one evening. Now he kept on telling how he had worked for 2 days at Sioux Center without making a sale. He said, 'It's impossible to sell at Sioux Center because the people there are Holland Dutch, they're clannish, and they won't buy from a stranger. Besides, the territory has had a crop failure for 5 years.' I suggested that we sell the next day at Sioux Center, the town where he had worked for 2 days without making a sale. So the next morning we drove to Sioux Center. For there I intended to prove that the salesman with PMA who believed in and used our company's system could sell regardless of the obstacles. And while the salesman was driving, I closed my eyes, relaxed, meditated, and conditioned my mind. I kept my mind on the reasons why I should and would sell these people rather than why I wouldn't or couldn't. Here's what I thought: he says that they are Holland Dutch and clannish, therefore they won't buy. That's good. What's so good about it? It's a well-known fact that if you sell one of a clan, particularly a leader, you can sell the entire clan. Now all I have to do is to make the first sale to the right person. He'll do it even if it takes a long time." Again, he claims that the territory has had a crop failure for 5 years. What could be more wonderful? The Holland Dutch are marvelous people and they save their money. Also, they are responsible and want to protect their families and property. And, as a matter of fact, they probably have not purchased accident insurance from any other insurance salesman because other salesmen wouldn't even try. For they, like the salesman with whom I am driving, would have a negative mental attitude. Our policies offer excellent protection at a low cost. Actually 111 find no competition. I then engaged in what I term mind conditioning. I repeated to myself with reverence, sincerity, expectation, and emotion, "Please God help me sell. Please God help me sell. Over and over again I repeated, "Please God help me sell." Then I took a nap. And when we arrived at Sioux Center, we called at the bank. Now the personnel consisted of a vice president, a cashier, and a teller. Within 20 minutes the vice president had purchased the most protection our company was willing to sell, a full unit. And the cashier purchased a full unit. But the teller will never be forgotten by me because he didn't buy. And starting with the first place of business next to the bank, we began cold canvassing systematically, store after store, office after office. We interviewed every individual in each establishment. An amazing thing happened. Every person we called on that day purchased the full unit. And there was no exception. While riding back to Sioux City I thanked the divine power for the assistance I had received. Now why did I succeed in selling in the same place where the other man had failed? Actually I experienced success for exactly the same reasons that he had experienced failure, except for the something more. He said it was impossible to sell them because they were Holland Dutch and clannish. That's NMA. Now I knew they would buy because they were Holland Dutch and clannish. That's PMA. Again, he said it was impossible to sell them because they had had a crop failure for 5 years. That's NMA. I knew they would buy because they had had a crop failure for 5 years. And that's PMA. Now the something more was the difference between PMA and NMA. For I had asked for divine guidance and help. What's more, I believed that I was receiving it. Now this salesman returned to Sioux Center and stayed for a long time. And each day that he was there was a record day in sales for him. This illustrates the value of motivating another person by example, for this salesman also succeeded where he had failed because he learned the value of working with a positive mental attitude. There are many ways to motivate a person, but a most effective way is through an inspirational book. When you want to motivate, say it with a book. The most important factors to success in selling are in order of importance: A. Inspiration to motivation. B. Knowledge of a successful sales technique for the particular product or service which is termed know-how. C. Knowledge of the product or service itself. Now these same 3 principles can be related to success in any business or profession. In the story that you have just read you can assume that the salesman had knowledge of the sales know-how and knowledge of the service he was selling. But he did lack the most important ingredient: inspiration to motivation. In 1937, Morris Pickus, a well-known sales executive and sales counselor, gave Think and Grow Rich to W. Clement Stone. Since then, he has used inspirational books such as those mentioned in Success through a Positive Mental Attitude to help salesmen to develop inspiration to motivation. Mr. Stone knows that inspiration and enthusiasm are the life of a sales organization. And because the flame of inspiration and enthusiasm will be extinguished unless the fuel that feeds it is kept replenished, Mr. Stone has made it a habit to see that his representatives receive a self-help book each quarter of the year. And this is in addition to weekly and monthly bulletins that are intended to act as mental vitamins. If you know what motivates a person, you can motivate him. As a boy, Walter Clark of Walter Clark Associates, Providence, Rhode Island, intended to be a doctor. But when he grew older, he thought he wanted to become an engineer. And he studied engineering. At Columbia University, however, he found the study of the functioning of the human mind so interesting and challenging that he changed from engineering to psychology. And finally he received his master's degree. Walter Clark worked as a personnel officer in Macy's department store and several other well-known concerns. At that time the known psychological tests developed the specific information for which they were intended, an applicant's IQ, aptitude, and personality. But something important was missing. Walter endeavored to find the missing factor. He thought, an engineer can select the proper part and put it in its place so that a machine will function efficiently. And that is exactly what I want to do with people. I want to select the right person for the right job. You see, Walter, like many personnel officers, found people fail on their job even though their psychological tests indicated that they had sufficient intelligence, aptitude, and personality to succeed on the job. Why then do we have so much absenteeism, turnover, and failure? He asked himself. What's the missing factor? Now the answer to this question became so simple and obvious that it is truly amazing that other psychologists had not discovered it. For you see, a person is more than a mechanical body. He is a mind with a body. He succeeds or fails because he is or is not motivated. Therefore, Walter endeavored to develop an analysis technique that would a. indicate the individual's tendencies in behavior in either a pleasant or antagonistic environment, b. show the sort of environment that attracts and repels him under favorable or unfavorable situations, c. in essence indicate what comes naturally to the individual. Also, he endeavored to develop a technique that could be used to analyze the requirements of a given job successfully. And because he worked hard and continued to search, Walter Clark found and recognized exactly what he was looking for. For he developed what he called activity vector analysis, better known as AVA. It is based on semantics, specifically, the reaction of the individual to word symbols. From the answers given by the applicant, Clark designed a chart. And he likewise came up with a formula for designing a similar diagram for any specific job. Now when the diagram of the applicant corresponded with that of the job, he had a perfect combination. Why? For then the applicant would have a job doing the kind of work that came naturally to him. And a person will do what he likes to do, it's fun. Now the sole purpose of AVA as conceived by Walter Clark is to help business management in a. the selection of personnel, b. management development, c. cutting the high cost of absenteeism, d. personnel turnover. Walter Clark achieved a definite major aim. Now for many years W. Clement Stone kept searching for a scientific working tool that could aid him in his efforts to help the representatives under his supervision to achieve success in solving their personal, family, social, and business problems. He was looking for a simple, accurate, and usable formula that would eliminate guesswork and save time when applied to a specific individual in a given environment. Therefore, when he heard of AVA, Mr. Stone investigated and immediately recognized that it was the working tool that he had so long been looking for. He could see that AVA might be used for purposes far beyond that for which it was conceived. And when he studied under Walter Clark, his conclusions were confirmed. For when you know a. what the personality traits of the individual are, b. what his environment is, c. what motivates him, you then can motivate that individual. How to motivate another person. While reading Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude, you have seen the importance of semantics, word symbols, suggestion, self-suggestion, and auto-suggestion. This was particularly true when you read Chapter 4. Now Mr. Stone combined this knowledge with what he learned from AVA. And thus he made what to him was a great discovery in the technique of motivating other persons. For the discovery was, with PMA you can be what you want to be, if you are willing to pay the price. This is true regardless of your past experiences, aptitude, IQ, or environment. Remember, you have the power to choose. Now you don't have to study AVA to learn how to motivate yourself and others. But it could certainly help you. For you can use the proper technique when you know what motivates an individual. And the simple technique that you can use to help you motivate yourself and others is based on the use of suggestion, self-suggestion, and auto-suggestion. Let's be specific. 1. If for example a salesman is timid and his job requires him to be aggressive, then, a. the sales manager uses reason to point out that timidity is natural. He proves that others have overcome timidity. He then recommends that the salesman state to himself frequently a word or self-motivator that would symbolize what the salesman wants to be. B. And in this instance, the salesman would repeat every morning and other times throughout the day the following words with rapidity and frequency: be aggressive. Be aggressive. He would particularly do so if he had a feeling of timidity in a specific environment where it was necessary to act. In such an instance he would act on the self-starter, do it now. 2. When a sales manager discovers that one of his men is deceitful or dishonest, he will have a talk with his representative. And if he sees the representative wants to cure the fault, then, A. The sales manager tells how others have solved this difficulty. He gives the salesman an inspirational book, article, poem, or recommends specific Bible passages. We have found that books like 7 Can and I Dare You are particularly effective. B. And in such an instance, as in B. above, the salesman would repeat be truthful. Be truthful, with rapidity every morning and at frequent intervals throughout the day. He would particularly do so at the time that he was tempted to be dishonest or engage in deception in a specific environment where it was necessary for him to make a decision. He would act on the self-motivator, have the courage to face the truth as well as the self-starter, do it now. Now this plan should be easy for you to understand as it is illustrated frequently throughout this book. And because you understand its effectiveness, you yourself will use it. And in addition, you, unlike the hundreds of thousands of persons who have read Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, will now immediately use Franklin's method to achieve success. You, unlike them, have been given the secret of getting things done, do it now. Use Franklin's method to achieve results. Yes, many hundreds of thousands of persons have read Benjamin Franklin's autobiography. Yet they didn't learn how to use the success principles contained in it. But at least one man did, Frank Bettger. He listened to the messages that were applicable to him. For he had a problem, he was a failure in business. And he was searching for a workable, down-to-earth formula that would help him help himself. And because he knew what he was looking for, he discovered Franklin's secret. Franklin indicated that he owed all of his success and happiness to just one idea, a formula for personal achievement. Now Bettger recognized that formula and used it. What happened? He raised himself from failure to success. He tells us about it in his great, motivating book. Now, why shouldn't you use Franklin's formula for personal achievement? You can, if you will. If the authors of this book succeed in motivating you to use this one idea, you too will, like Bettger, be able to raise yourself from failure to success. Or, if you are not a failure, then you will through the use of Franklin's method be able to obtain what you seek, be it wisdom, virtue, happiness, health, or wealth. Now Bettger wrote out his objectives on 13 separate cards. The first one is entitled Enthusiasm. The self-motivator is, to be enthusiastic, act enthusiastic. As the great teacher and psychologist, William James, has so conclusively proved, the emotions are not immediately subject to reason, but they are immediately subject to action. And the action can be physical or it can be mental. A thought can be just as stimulating and effective as a deed in changing an emotion from negative to positive. In such an instance the act, be it physical or mental, precedes the emotion. See how the plan works. Because the purpose of success through a positive mental attitude is to help you, and because the authors want you to get into action, we shall now illustrate how we motivate individuals in an audience to action through the Franklin Bettger system. Here's how we have motivated many thousands of students to apply the Franklin Bettger plan using the card Enthusiasm and the self-motivator, to be enthusiastic, act enthusiastic. We call a student to the front of the class and give him a simple yet effective lesson that he will learn immediately. Here's how we do it, try it. Here is the dialogue that would take place between the instructor and student. Note, the dialogue of the instructor is in bold-face type. The student's answers are set in italics. Do you want to feel enthusiastic? Yes. Then learn the self-motivator, to be enthusiastic, act enthusiastic. Now repeat this phrase. To be enthusiastic, act enthusiastic. Right? What is the key word in the affirmation? Act. That's right. Let's paraphrase the message and thus you will learn the principle and be able to relate and assimilate it into your own life. If you want to be sick, what do? Act sick. You're right. If you want to be melancholy, what do you do? Act melancholy. Right again. And if you want to be enthusiastic, what do you do? To be enthusiastic, act enthusiastic. We then proceed to point out that you can relate the self-motivator to any desirable virtue or personal aim. Thus we might take justice as an example, and a card could read, to be just, act just. And then the instructor would proceed, remember, when someone else's idea is accepted by you, it becomes your idea for your use. You own it. Now I want you to talk in an enthusiastic tone of voice. I want you to act enthusiastically. To speak enthusiastically, do the following. 1. Talk loudly. This is particularly necessary if you are emotionally upset, if you are shaking inside when you stand before an audience, if you have butterflies in your stomach. 2. Talk rapidly. Your mind functions more quickly when you do. You can read 2 books with greater understanding in the time you now read one if you concentrate and read with rapidity. 3. Emphasize. Emphasize important words, words that are important to you or your listening audience, a word like your, for example. 4. Hesitate. When you talk rapidly, hesitate where there would be a period, comma, or other punctuation in the written word. Thus you employ the dramatic effect of silence. The mind of the person who is listening catches up with the thoughts you have expressed. Hesitation after a word which you wish to emphasize accentuates the emphasis. 5. Keep a smile in your voice. Thus in talking loudly and rapidly, you eliminate gruffness. You can put a smile in your voice by putting a smile on your face, a smile in your eyes. 6. Modulate. This is important if you are speaking for a long period. Remember, you can modulate both pitch and volume. You can speak loudly and intermittently change to a conversational tone and a lower pitch if you wish. Do it now. Now in the previous chapter you have read the 13 principles used by Benjamin Franklin. And here you have been told that enthusiasm is the first of the 13 principles used by Frank Bettger. And you know that a positive mental attitude is the first of the 17 success principles. Therefore, if you have not already done so, start the first of your own 17 cards with the heading Develop a Positive Mental Attitude / follow through with a card for each of the 17 success principles and use Franklin's method to achieve results. Your action on the self-starter Do It Now at this time would prove conclusively that you can motivate yourself. You can. And if you purposely motivate yourself, you will find it easy to motivate others. And now that you know how to motivate yourself and others, you are ready to receive the key to the citadel of wealth. The next chapter answers the question, is there a shortcut to riches? Pilot number 10. Thoughts to steer by. How to motivate others. 1. Throughout life you play dual parts in which you motivate others and they motivate you. 2. Motivate others to have confidence in themselves by showing them that you have faith in them. 3. A letter can change a life for the better. 4. Motivate others by example. 5. When you want to motivate, say it with an inspirational book. 6. If you know what motivates a person you can motivate him. 7. Motivate others by suggestion. Motivate yourself by self-suggestion. 8. While your emotions are not always subject to reason, nonetheless they are subject to action. 9. To become enthusiastic, act enthusiastic. 10. To speak enthusiastically and to overcome timidity and fear. A. Talk loudly. B. Talk rapidly. C. Emphasize. D. Hesitate. E. Keep a smile in your voice. F. Modulate. 11. Start the first of your 17 PMA success cards. Do it now. Anything in life worth having is worth working for.